Chapter 4. Aggression Part 2. Wei Wuxian's first thought was that something went wrong with the flag formation that the boy set up. His inventions needed to be used extremely carefully, or else disasters could happen. This was also why he went to check if there was anything wrong with the motifs that were drawn. As a few pairs of big hands came to track him outside, Wei Wuxian straightened his body and allowed them to do so without difficulty, so that he wouldn't have to walk by himself. The East Hall was bustling with people, almost more crowded than when the villagers of Mo Village gathered here. All of the servants and relatives were present. Some were still in their undergarments and didn't yet have the time to brush their hair, but everyone looked terrified. Madame Mo was collapsed in her seat, as if she just woke up from a swoon. The streaks of tears could be seen on her cheeks, and tears still lingered in her eyes. But as Wei Wuxian was dragged inside, her sorrowful gaze immediately became hateful. A human-shaped object lay on the ground, with its body covered by a white cloth, and only the head being revealed. Elaine Siji and the other boys wore heavy expressions, bending down to check the situation and talking in soft voices. The conversation leaked into Wei Wuxian's ears. Less than 3 minutes have passed since the body was discovered. After subduing the walking corpse, we hurried from the west courtyard to the east courtyard and found the corpse by the hallway. The human-shaped thing was, apparently, Mo Ziyun. Wei Wuxian took one glance at it and couldn't help but to look again. The corpse looked like Mo Ziyun in some ways, but unlike him in other ways. Although the features were clearly that of his petty cousins, the cheekbones were deeply sunken, eyes bulging, and skin wrinkled. Compared to the youthful Mo Ziyun before this, it was as if he aged 20 years. It also seemed like his blood and flesh were sucked out of him, turning him into a skeleton with only a thin layer of skin on the outside. If before this, Mo Ziyun was just ugly, now his corpse was both old and ugly. As Wei Wuxian was scrutinizing the corpse, Madame Mo suddenly rushed towards him, with a gleaming dagger in her hand. Being light on his feet, Elaine Siji quickly knocked the dagger off. Before he had a chance to talk, Madame Mo shrieked at him, "My son died a tragic death, so I am only avenging him. What are you stopping me for?" Wei Wuxian hid behind Elaine Siji's back again, and spoke while squatting. "How does your son's tragic death concern me?" During the day, Elaine Siji saw Wei Wuxian make a scene in the East Hall, and afterwards, he also heard a lot of exaggerated rumors from other people. He felt extremely sympathetic to the invalid, and couldn't help but to take his side. "Madame Mo, seeing from your son's condition, his flesh and essence have been drawn out of him, which means that he was killed by evil beings, not him." Madame Mo's chest heaved. "You know nothing. The lunatic's father was a cultivator. He must have learned a lot of demonic spells from him." Elaine Siji turned around to look at the seemingly dull-witted Wei Wuxian, and spoke again. "UHM, madame. There is a lack of evidence, so—" "The evidence is on my son." Madame Mo pointed at the corpse on the ground. "Look for yourselves. A Yuan's remains already told me who murdered him." Not needing other people to do it, Wei Wuxian lifted the white cloth by himself, from the head down to the feet. There was something missing on Mo Ziyun's dead body. His left arm, severed from below his shoulder, had disappeared. Madame Mo spoke. "Do you see this? Everyone who were here heard what the lunatic said, right? He said that if a Yuan touched his belongings again, he would cut off his hand." After the burst of emotion, she covered her face and sobbed. "My poor Yuan. Although he did not do anything to him at all, he was not only framed, but also killed as well. The lunatic is out of his mind." Out of his mind. It had been a few years since he last heard the phrase being used to describe him, so it was quite cordial. Wei Wuxian pointed at himself, but no words came to him. He didn't know if he was the ill one, or if it was Madame Mo. When he was younger, he talked quite a lot about exterminating entire families and clans, killing millions of people, creating rivers of blood, and other cruel actions, but most of the time, they were empty words. If he could actually do the things that he said, he would have long been dominating the cultivation world. Madame Mo's true intention wasn't to avenge for him, but to find someone to let out her resentment on. Wu Wuxian didn't want to be bothered with her. He thought for a moment, and stuck his hand into Mo Ziyun's arms. He fished around for a moment and pulled something out, unfolding it in front of him. Surprisingly, it was a phantom attraction flag. Instantly, he realized what was going on, and uttered under his breath, he had it coming. When Elaine Siji and the others saw what was taken out of Mo Ziyun's arms, they also understood the situation, associating this with the farce that happened today. The cause was easy to guess. During the day, Mo Ziyun lost face because of Mo Xuanyu's crazy behavior and loathed him, still wanting to square up with him. However, Mo Xuanyu wandered outside for a long while, so Mo Ziyun planned to sneak up on him at night when he would be returning. When night had fallen, he secretly went outside and was passing the west courtyard when he saw the phantom attraction flags on the walls. Although he was repeatedly told not to go outside or near the west courtyard at night, and especially to stay away from these black flags, Mo Ziyun thought that he was told to do so because they were scared of people stealing the valuable weapons. He had no idea about the dangerous effects of these phantom attraction flags, or that if he held it, he would be turned into a living target. He got addicted to stealing his cousin's talismans and magic tools, and he would always itch to take odd items like this, not giving up until he obtained it. Therefore, when the owners of the flags were subduing walking corpses in the west courtyard, he quietly took one. The flag formation utilized 6 flags, of which 5 were set in the west courtyard, with the boys from the LAN family as baits. However, they were all carrying countless magic tools on them, and although Mo Ziyun only took a single flag, he didn't have any tools for protection on him. It was common sense to pick on the weak, so the evil beings would naturally be attracted to him. If there were only walking corpses, then it wouldn't matter too much. Even if he was bitten, he wouldn't die immediately and could still be saved. Unfortunately, the phantom attraction flag accidentally attracted something worse than a walking corpse. The unknown being was what killed Mo Ziyun and took his arm. Wei Wuxian raised his wrist. Sure enough, one of the cuts on his right hand had healed. It looked like that he had scored a lucky hit. The sacrificial contract had already deemed the death of Mo Ziyun as his doing. Madame Mo was well aware of her son's foibles, but she wasn't willing to admit that Mo Ziyun caused his own death. Due to impatience and rage, she grabbed a teacup and threw it in the direction of Wei Wuxian's head. If you didn't frame him in front of so many people yesterday, would he go out in the middle of the night? It's all your fault, you son of a bitch. Wei Wuxian saw it coming and dodged to the side. Madame Mo turned to Elaine Siji and screeched, "And you bunch of useless fools. You cultivate and ward off evil spirits, but you can't even protect him. A Yuan is still a child." The boys were still young. They hadn't been outside much, and were too inexperienced to find anything wrong with the area, which was why they felt sorry for not detecting an evil being as fierce as this one. Nonetheless, after Madame Mo's senseless scolding, they all looked blue in the face. After all, they grew up in a prominent family, so nobody dared to treat them like this. The Guzulan clan was extremely strict to its disciples, forbidding violence against the powerless everyman, not even allowing disrespect. Therefore, even if they felt displeased, they had to keep everything down with dark expressions. However, Wei Wuxian couldn't stand it any longer and thought, it has been so many years, but the LAN clan's values are still the same. What's the use their so-called self-restraint? Watch me do this the right way. He spat loudly and spoke. Who do you think you're taking out your anger on? Did you really see them as your servants? They traveled far and wide to come here and exorcise evil spirits for you without taking a penny. Do they owe you anything? How old is your son? He should be at least 17. And so, how is he still a child? How young of a child does he have to be to not understand basic human language? Did they or did they not repeatedly instruct him to not touch anything in the formation and not approach the west courtyard? Your son sneaked outside at night on his own. Is it my fault, or is it his? Lan Jingyi and the others let out a breath of air. Faces not so dark anymore. Madame Mo was both extremely mournful and resentful, and all she could think about was the word death. Not her own death so that she could be with her son, but the deaths of everyone in the world, especially the ones in front of her right now. She had a habit of ordering her husband to do everything, and so she knocked him. Call everyone inside. Even so, her husband was in a trance, possibly because of the trauma from his only child passing away. He went as far as to backhandedly push her. It caught Madame Mo by surprise, and she fell onto the ground. In the past, Madame Mo didn't even need to push him. If she just raised her voice, he would comply immediately. How could he dare to strike back today? The servants were all scared out of their wits from her expression. A ding helped her up while quivering. Madame Mo clutched her chest and spoke in a trembling voice. You, get out of here as well. Her husband seemed like he didn't hear anything. A ding gave a few looks to a Tong, and a Tong hurriedly helped his master to walk outside. The East Hall was in chaos. As Wei Wuxian saw that the family had finally silenced, he intended to examine the corpse again. However, before he took another look at it, another high-pitched scream pierced through the air. It was from the courtyard. The people in the hall all rushed outside. On the ground of the east courtyard, there were two twitching. The first was that of a Tongs, still alive, collapsed on the ground. The other fallen body was wrinkled and withered, as if the blood and the flesh had been emptied dry. The left arm was already gone, but no blood came out of the wound. The condition of the corpse was the same as Mosey's. Madame Mo brushed over Ding's supporting hand a second ago, but as she saw the corpse on the ground, her eyes widened, and she was finally out of energy to throw another fit. As she fainted, Wei Wuxian happened to be next to her, and gave her a hand, passing her to a Ding who came running. He looked at his right hand to see that another one of the cuts was also gone. It was merely a few seconds before they walked over the threshold of the hall, not even past the east courtyard yet, and saw Madame Mo's husband die distressingly. Elaine Siji, Elaine Jingyi, and the others also grew pale in the face. Elaine Siji was the first to calm down and asked Atong, who lay on the ground, "Did you see what it was?" Atong was almost scared to death, unable to open his mouth. Even after a few moments of asking, Atong still couldn't answer, and only shook his head repeatedly. Elaine Siji was burning with anxiety. He asked another disciple to take him back inside, and turned to Elaine Jinji. "Did you send the signal?" Elaine Jingyi answered, "I did. But if there are no seniors who can assist us in the area, it would take at least an hour for our people to come here. What should we do now? We don't even know what it was." Of course, it would be impossible for them to leave if the disciples of a clan only cared about their own well-being when facing evil spirits. It would not only be bringing disgrace upon the clan, they themselves would also be ashamed to face others. The frightened people of the Mo family couldn't go either, because it was likely that the evil being was among them, so nothing would be gained from going away. Elaine Siji gritted his teeth. Wait here for the reinforcements. Now that the signal for help had been sent, other cultivators would come to aid them within a short period of time. To prevent things from getting out of hand, Wei Wuxian should withdraw and keep away from the situation. If the persons who came happened to know him or fought with him before, it would be hard to say what was going to happen next. However, with the curse, he couldn't leave Mo village anytime soon. In addition, the being that was attracted here had taken the lives of two people within such a short amount of time, which meant that it must have been extremely vicious. If Wei Wuxian left now, when the helpers came, the streets of Mo village might be packed with corpses who lost their left arms, including a few disciples of blood relations to the Kuzulan clan as well. After pondering for a moment, Wei Wuxian told himself, "Finish it quickly." The boys on the side were all young and inexperienced. However, although they all looked nervous, they strictly stuck to their positions and protected the Mo family's house, fixing talismans onto the walls. The servant named Atong was already carried into the hall. Elaine Siji felt his pulse with his left hand and supported Madame Mo's back with his right. He couldn't save both of them at once, and was in a terrible fix when Atong crawled up from the ground. A Ding exclaimed, "Atong, you're awake." Before her face had the time to light up, Atong raised his left hand and clutched his own neck. Seeing this, Elaine Siji tapped on a few of his acupoints for 3 times. Wei Wuxian knew that, although they looked gentle, the people from the Elaine clan had arm strength that were the opposite of gentle. With a force like this, it would be hard for anyone to move. However, Atong seemed like he didn't feel anything, and his left hand's grip tightened, his expressions looking more painful and twisted. Elaine Jinji proceeded to grab his left hand, but it was like breaking off a chunk of iron, having no effect at all. After a moment, a crack came from his neck, and Atong's head drooped down. His neck was already broken. He actually strangled himself in front of everyone's eyes. Seeing the situation, a Ding's voice wavered. "A ghost. There's an invisible ghost here." It made Atong strangle himself. Her tone was sharp and her voice was shrill, making everyone's blood run cold, and so they believed it effortlessly. Wei Wuxian's judgment happened to be the opposite. It wasn't a ferocious ghost. He had examined the talismans that the boys chose. All of them were spirit-fending ones, and the East Hall was literally covered with them. If it really was a ferocious ghost then, as it went into the East Hall, the talismans would have incinerated green flames. Yet, nothing was happening right now. It was not the group of kids' fault for reacting too slow, but the creature was indeed cruel. The cultivation world had a strict definition for the category of ferocious ghosts. They had to kill at least 1 person a month, and continue the behavior for at least 3 months. The criterion was set by Wei Wuxian himself, and it was probably still being used. He was the best at dealing with this kind. To him, killing one person in 7 days would be considered as a ferocious ghost who killed frequently. This thing killed 3 people at once, and within such a short period of time. It would be hard for even a capable cultivator to think of a solution immediately, let alone these juniors who had just started their careers. As he was thinking, the candlelight flickered. A sinister wind passed, and all of the lanterns and candles in the courtyard in the East Hall died out. The moment the lights were extinguished, screams came from everywhere. Everyone pushed and pulled, wanting to escape as fast as they could, stumbling and falling in the process. Genji shouted, "Stay where you are and don't run. I'm gonna catch whoever runs." He wasn't merely saying this to alarm the people. In fact, evil beings love to cause trouble in the dark and make profits in times of trouble. The worse the crying and chaos, the more likely it was to unknowingly attract danger. At times like this, being isolated or becoming nervous was extremely unsafe. However, everyone was frightened to death, so how could they still have ears for words like this? After a while, the East Hall grew quiet, with only a few light breaths and faint sobs. It was likely that only a few people were left. Amidst the dark, a fire lit up suddenly. Siji ignited a flame talisman. The fire from the flame talisman would not be extinguished by sinister winds. He used the talisman to light up the candle again, and the rest of the boys went to comfort the others. Under the light, Wei Wuxian casually looked at his wrists. Another cut had healed. After looking, he suddenly realized that there was something wrong about the number of cuts. Originally, he had 2 cuts on each of his wrists. One healed when Mo Ziyun died, and another healed when Mo Ziyun's father died. The death of the servant, Atong, healed one more of the cuts. Adding it up, only 3 cuts should have healed, with the last cut being the deepest and most hate-filled one. But right now, no cuts remained on his wrists. Wei Wuxian knew that Madame Mo was definitely one of Mo Xuanyu's targets of vengeance. The longest and deepest cut was probably saved for her, yet it had disappeared. Did Mo Xuanyu suddenly reach a point of epiphany and let go of his hate? That'd be impossible. His soul had already been sacrificed as the price for summoning Wei Wuxian. Only the death of Madame Mo could heal the wound. His gaze slowly moved towards the pale-faced Madame Mo, who recently woke up and was surrounded by everyone. Unless she was already dead. Wei Wuxian was sure that something was already possessing Madame Mo's body. If the being wasn't a spirit, then what was it? Suddenly, a ding cried, "Hand!" His hand, Atong's hand. Siji moved the flame talisman to above Atong's body. Sure enough, his left hand had disappeared as well. Left hand. With lightning speed, Wei Wuxian's mind became clear. With the being that was wreaking havoc, and the missing left arms finally completing the puzzle, he promptly bursted out laughing. Jingyi snapped, "You idiot! How can you still laugh in a situation like this?" But after a second thought, he knew that he was an idiot anyways. So what's the use of haggling over him? Wei Wuxian tugged at his sleeve. No. Jingyi was annoyed, pulling his sleeve back. What no? You're not an idiot. Stop fooling around. Nobody has the time to pay attention to you. Wei Wuxian pointed at the corpses of Mo Ziyun's father and Atong, which lay on the ground, and spoke. These are not them. Siji stopped the fuming Jingyi and asked, "What do you mean by, these are not them?" Wei Wuxian stated solemnly, "This is not Mo Ziyun's dad, and this is not Atong either." With his makeup-covered face, the more solemn he looked, the more he seemed like an actual lunatic, yet surrounded by the dim candlelight. His words sent chills up everyone's backs. Siji stared for a second and asked in spite of himself, "Why?" Wei Wuxian exclaimed proudly, "Their hands, none of them were left-handed. I'm sure of this, because they'd always hit me with their right hands." Jingyi spat, running out of patience. "What are you being proud for? Look at how complacent you are." However, Siji broke into a sweat. Thinking back, Atong had used his left hand to strangle himself, and Madame Mo's husband also used his left hand to push his wife. But during the day, when Mo Xuanyu was causing trouble in the East Hall, the two were rushing to get him out of there, both using their right hands. It was impossible for them to suddenly turn left-handed before they died. Although he didn't know why, in order to figure out what the creature was, they had to think in the direction of left hands. After Siji realized this, he felt surprised and looked at Wei Wuxian. He couldn't help but to think, suddenly saying this, "It doesn't seem like a coincidence." Wei Wuxian only smiled. He knew that the hint was too deliberate, but he couldn't have helped it. The good thing was that Elaine Siji didn't think too much about it either, and thought, anyways, if young Master Mo was willing to remind me of it, he probably didn't mean any harm. His eyes moved away from him, passing a ding, who fainted from crying too much, and landed on Madame Mo. His gaze traveled from her face down to her hands. Her arms were hanging down and were mostly hidden inside her sleeves, with only half of the fingers showing. Her right hand had fair, thin fingers, undoubtedly those of a woman who lived comfortably and never worked. However, the fingers on her left hand were much longer than the ones on her right. They were also thicker. The knuckles were bent, full of power. The hand isn't that of a woman's, it was a man's hand. Elaine Siji commanded. Take hold of her. A few boys grabbed Madame Mo. Elaine Siji said, excuse me, and was prepared to slap down a talisman, when Madame Mo's left hand suddenly twisted in an absurd way, aiming for his throat. Unless one's bones had been broken, it was impossible for a living person to twist their arm like this. She attacked quickly, and was extremely close to grabbing onto his neck, when at the same time, Elaine Jinyi shouted hey, and threw himself in front of Elaine Siji, blocking the hand for him. A flash passed, and as soon as the arm grabbed Elaine Jinyi's shoulder, green flames ignited on his arm, making it loosen its grip. Elaine Siji escaped death, and was about to thank Elaine Jinji for it, when he saw that half of the latter's uniform had already been burnt to ashes, looking quite awkward. Elaine Jinyi took off the other half of his uniform and scolded, fuming with rage. Why did you kick me, you lunatic? Did you want to kill me? Wei Wuxian scampered away like a frightened rat. It wasn't me, it was him. Inside of the Elaine clan's uniform jacket, there were compact stitchings of incantations using thin threads of the same color, included for protection. However, against strong ones like this, it could only be used once before it became invalid. During the emergency, he could only kick Elaine Jingyi and use his body to protect Elaine Siji's neck. Elaine Jingyi wanted to scold him again, but Madame Mo fell onto the ground, with all of the blood and flesh on her face being drained, until only a thin layer of skin was left on the skull. The male arm that didn't belong to her had fallen off her shoulders. Its fingers bent freely, as if it was stretching or exercising, and the throbs of its veins were clearly visible. This was the evil being that the Phantom Attraction flag had attracted. Being dismembered was a classic example of a distressing death. It was only somewhat more dignified than the way Wei Wuxian died. Unlike the situation of being crushed to powder, the limbs and parts of the corpse would be tainted with some of the resentment of the person who died, and it would want to reunite with the other parts and die with a whole corpse. Therefore, it would come up with strategies to find the other parts of the body. If it found it, it might be satisfied and rest in peace, or it might stir up more trouble. If it couldn't find it, the body part would have to put up with the second best option. What would the second best option be? It would have to make do with the bodies of living humans. It was like this left hand eat the left hand of a living person and replace it. After draining all of the person's blood and energy, it would abandon the body and find another container for parasitism, until it finally collected all of the other parts of its corpse. As soon as the arm had possessed a person, they would die immediately. But before all of the flesh had been eaten, they would still be able to walk around, under its control, as if the person was still alive. After it was attracted, the first container that it found was Mo Ziyun. The second one was Mo Ziyun's father. When Madame Mo told her husband to go away, he acted out of the norm and pushed her. Wei Wuxian originally thought that it was because he was grieving his son's deed, and also tired of his wife's arrogance. Now that he thought about it again, it wasn't what a father who had just lost his son should look like. It wasn't the indifference from feeling hopeless. It was a deadly tranquility, the tranquility coming from an already deceased person. The third container was a Tong, and the fourth one was Madame Mo. During the chaos from when the lights suddenly went out, the ghost hand had transferred onto her body. When Madame Mo died, the last cut on Wei Wuxian's wrists also disappeared. The boys from the Elaine clan saw that, although talismans didn't work, clothing did, and all took off their coats to cover the left hand. The layers of clothing looked like a white cocoon. After a second, the ball of white clothes ignited with a whoosh, creating a green, abnormal inferno. Although it would take care of the moment, after a while, when the uniforms were completely burned, the hand would emerge from within the ashes, while nobody was looking. Wei Wuxian ran towards the west courtyard. The 10 or so walking corpses that were subdued by the boys stood silently in the courtyard, sealed by the incantations drawn on the ground. Wei Wuxian kicked one of the symbols, destroying the entire formation. He clapped twice. Suddenly, with a jolt, the whites of the walking corpse's eyes all turned upward, as if they were woken up by a bolt of thunder. Wei Wuxian spoke. Wake up. It's time to work. He usually didn't need complex incantations to control these. Corpse puppets, a straightforward command would do as well. The walking corpses in front of him moved a few quivering steps. But as they approached Wei Wuxian, their legs grew weak and they collapsed onto the ground, as if they were real humans. Wei Wuxian found it both funny and annoying. He clapped his hands again, this time lighter. However, these walking corpses were probably born in O Village, and died here as well, not having experienced life fully. They instinctively followed the summoner's commands, but were also horrified at the summoner, lying on the ground and afraid to get up. The crueler the being was, the better Wei Wuxian could control it. These walking corpses hadn't been trained by him, and couldn't withstand direct manipulations from him. He didn't have any materials on him, which meant that he couldn't immediately make tools to ease the walking corpses. He couldn't even muddle and assemble bits and pieces. The soaring green flames in the east courtyard gradually grew dimmer. Suddenly, Wei Wuxian found a solution. Why would he need to come outside and find a dead person with strong resentment and a cruel personality? There were not only one, but multiple corpses in the east hall. He ran back to the east courtyard. As Untamed first solution failed, he found a second one. The disciples pulled out their swords and stuck them into the ground, making a sword fence. The ghost hand crashed into the fence, and they spent all their energy compressing their hilts so that it didn't break out, paying no attention to who was entering and leaving. Wei Wuxian strode into the east hall and grabbed Madame Mo and Mo Ziyun's corpses, one on each hand, and spoke in a low voice, "Wake up." In a split second, Madame Mo and Mo Ziyun's eye whites turned up and started making the shrill and powerful shrieks that ferocious ghosts made after they came back to life. Amidst the shrieks, another corpse trembled and crawled up, making the lowest and faintest shriek. It was Madame Mo's husband. The shrieks were loud enough, and the resentment was strong enough. Wei Wuxian smiled, feeling quite satisfied. "Do you recognize the hand outside?" he commanded. "Tear it apart." The three members of the Mo family whipped out like three clouds of black wind. The left arm fractured one of the swords and was about to break out when three cruel corpses without left arms came at it. Aside from being unable to defy Wei Wuxian's command, the family also loathed the creature that killed them and let out their anger on the ghost hand. The main attacker was undoubtedly Madame Mo, because female corpses were often especially fierce after they were modified. Her hair was loose and her eyes were bloodshot, with nails that multiplied in length, foam gathering at the corners of her mouth, and shrieks that were enough to uplift the ceiling. She looked extremely insane. Behind her followed Mo Ziyun, who cooperated with her and used both his teeth and his hands. His father was at the end, covering for the gaps between the attacks of the other two corpses. The struggling boys were stricken dumb with amazement. They had only seen these battles between multiple fierce corpses in books and hearsay, and they all gaped as they saw the gore-splattered scene. For the first time, unable to avert their gazes, they all thought that it was absolutely thrilling. The three corpses and the hand were in the middle of a tough battle when Mo Ziyun abruptly moved out of the way. His abdomen area was attacked by the hand, causing a few chunks of his intestines to spill out. As Madame Mo saw this, she screamed incessantly and shielded her son behind herself. Her attacks were more violent, the strength of her fingers almost comparable to that of steel and iron weapons. But Wei Wuxian knew that she was gradually being overpowered. Even three cruel corpses who recently died couldn't subdue this single arm. Wei Wuxian was watching the battle attentively. His tongue was slightly curled, suppressing a sharp whistle inside of his lips, preparing it to be let out. The whistle would be able to evoke even more hostility in the cruel corpses, which might turn the tables. Then, however, it would be difficult to ensure that nobody knew that it was his doing. In the blink of an eye, the hand moved like lightning, ruthlessly and precisely breaking Madame Mo's neck. Watching as the Mo family grew closer to defeat, Wei Wuxian prepared to blow the whistle that he suppressed under his tongue. At the same time, the echoes of two strums on a stringed instrument came from far away. The sound seemed to have been played by a human. The timbre was ethereal and clear, carrying the bleak chills of windswept pines. The creatures battling in the courtyard all stiffened as they heard the sound. Instantaneously, the boys from the Guzulan clan started beaming, as if they were born again. Lansiji wiped the blood off his face and raised his head, happily exclaiming, "Han Guangjun." As soon as he heard the two faraway strums of the zither, Wei Wuxian turned around and began to leave. The sound of another strum came. This time, the pitch was higher, piercing through the sky with a few degrees of bitterness. The three cruel corpses backed off and covered one ear with their right hands. However, it was impossible to block out the eradication tone of the Guzulan clan by means such as this. They had just retreated a few steps, and slight bursting sounds came from within their skulls, because the arm had just endured a tough fight. After hearing the sound of the strings again, it instantly fell onto the ground. Although the fingers were still flinching, the arm was unable to move. After a short moment of silence, the boys couldn't help but to cheer loudly, celebrating the joy of surviving the incident. They had struggled through the exhilarating night, and their clan's reinforcement had finally came. Even if they'd be punished because of reasons such as being discourteous and making noise is harmful to the clan's reputation, they didn't care. After waving towards the moon, L.A. and Siji suddenly realized that someone had disappeared. He tugged L.A. and Jingyi. Where is he? L.A. and Jingyi was absorbed in the act of rejoicing. Who? Which one? L.A. and Siji replied. Young Master Mo. L.A. and Jingyi said, Why are you looking for that lunatic? Who knows where he ran off to? He's probably frightened by my threats to hit him. L.A. and Siji knew that L.A. and Jingyi had always been careless and straightforward, not thinking twice about anything or suspecting anyone. He thought, I'll wait for Han Guangjun to come, and then tell him about everything. Mo Village was still asleep, but it was difficult to tell whether it was a real slumber or a faked one. Although the corpse fight was a mass of blood and gore, the villagers didn't wake up during the early morning to watch. After all, even bystanders needed to choose which events to show up at. One that involved lots of screaming was definitely not the safest type. Wei Wuxian eliminated all evidence of the sacrificial formation in Mo Xuanyu's room as fast as he could and ran out the door. Unfortunately, the person who came happened to be from the Lian clan, but even more unfortunately, he happened to be Lian Wangji. This was one of the people who had fought with him before, so he should retreat quickly. He was in a hurry to find a mount. As he passed a courtyard and saw a big millstone inside, a donkey was tied to the handle, chewing on its mouth. When it saw him run over rashly, it seemed like it was surprised and eyed him sideways as if it was a real person. Wei Wuxian made eye contact with him for 1 second and was immediately touched by the minuscule amount of contempt in its eyes. He tried to grab onto the rope and pull it out, but the donkey complained by making a few loud noises. Therefore, Wei Wuxian had to use both his words and his strength to deceive it and get it onto the road. As dawn came over the horizon, they went off onto the main path